right, so today we are working on Chapter 2, Lesson 4, percents that are greater than 100% and percents that are less than 1%. So in this example, or in this lesson, we're first of all, make sure you're on page 117. We're working in 6th grade with ratios and percentages. 3C, find a percent of a quantity as a rate per 100. Solve problems involving finding the whole, given a part, and given a part and the percent. So number one, we're looking at an example with plants. There are over 220,000 species of plants on Earth. Okay, of those, 590 are carnivorous, which means they eat living things. Okay, so 590 of those are carnivorous, so we'll write 590 out of 220,000 different species of plants. So plants such as the Venus flytrap catch their prey as food. So number one said, write the fractions of species of carnivorous plants in simplest form. And so then we wrote the 590 out of 220,000. And when we look at these, we can see that they both end in 0, which means they're both divisible by 10. So we can simplify this by dividing each of these by 10. Okay, we can see that they kind of also gave that clue here because it went from 220,000 to 22,000. So then we do the same thing in the numerator. 590 divided by 10 is 59. All right. Number 2, write your answer to exercise 1 as a decimal rounded to the nearest thousandth. So we will need to do some rounding because we don't want to keep dividing forever and ever. So as a decimal rounded to the nearest thousandth, use division to find your answer. So what we have here is 59 over 59 over 22,000. So what this means is 59 divided by 22,000. So we write our 59. And we're going to divide that by 22,000. Okay, so 59 is a pretty small number. And 22,000 is obviously much bigger. Okay, because most plants do not eat living things. Okay, so the majority of plants are not carnivorous. So we know the percentage, or excuse me, the decimal is going to be a small number. A very small portion of plants are carnivorous plants. So 59 divided by 22,000. So we know we're going to need to annex some zeros because 22,000 is bigger than 59. So we're going to start off by putting a decimal point here and bringing it straight up. Okay. Does 22,000 go into 59? No, it does not. Okay, so we're going to, above the 9, we're going to write a 0. Then we'll annex a 0. Does 22,000 go into 590? No, it does not. Okay, so above this 0, we're going to write a 0. And then we'll annex another 0. We're getting closer. Does 22,000 go into, that's a comma right there. Does 22,000 go into 5,900? Ignore this decimal. Would 22,000 go into 5,900? No, too small. 22,000 is too big. We have a 0 here, annex another 0. Does 22,000 go into 59,000? Yes, finally, okay. It can go in twice because 2 times 22,000 is 44,000. So we can write 44,000 and then subtract. 9 minus 4 is 5. 5 minus 4 is 1. So 15,000. Okay. And then we can bring down another 0. So annex another 0, bring it down. How many times would 22,000 go into 150,000? I'd say about 6 or 7. Let's try a 6, I think. Okay. So 6 times the 3 zeros, or 3 zeros here. Okay. 6 times 2 is 12. Write the 2 underneath that 0. Carry the 1. 6 times 2 is 12, plus the 1 we carried is 13. So then we subtract 150,000 minus 132,000. This is long division for sure. That's going to be 18. I like to count up instead of subtracting. So 132 to 142 is 10, plus 8 more takes me to 150. So you can do the regrouping though. I just sometimes will count up. Okay, and then I can stop. I don't need to keep bringing down zeros because I remember reading in my directions that they told me to round to the nearest thousandth. Okay, so I divided out to the 10,000th place, tenth, hundredth, thousandth, 10,000th, so that I could use the 10,000th place to help me to round to the nearest thousandth. Okay, so here's my answer that I have, 0.0026, and if I round that to the nearest thousandth, tenth, hundredth, thousandth, so I'm rounding to this decimal place right here. Look at the number after it. Is it 5 or higher? Yes, it is. So I need to round up. Okay. So this would be approximately equal to 0.003. Okay. So then they asked me to write that number, my answer to exercise 2, as a fraction. So when I read this number, I shouldn't read it as 0.003. How do I read that? I read it as 3 what? This is the tenth, this is the hundredth, this is the thousandth. So we'd read this as 3,000. So when we write that as a fraction, it is 3,000. Yep, so 3 over 1,000, correct. So then number 4, make a conjecture. Since 0.3 equals 30%, and 0.03, so 3 tenths is 30%, 3 hundredths would be 30%, excuse me, 3 hundredths would be 3%. What percent is equal to 3 thousandths? Okay, so this would be 0.3% following that same pattern. So since the denominator, excuse me, since the decimal 0.03 is 3%, then 0.003 is written as 0.3%. We just follow that patterning, extend the pattern to get our answer as a percentage. Okay, so I'm going to read that again because there's a lot of decimals and percents in one sentence. So 0.3% or 0.3%. Okay, so since the decimal 300th is 3%, excuse me, then 3,000 will be written as 0.3%, so 1 decimal place over. Okay, so that was page 117 about carnivorous plants. Okay, let's look at page 118. That book is already written in. Okay, page 118. Okay, so we're looking at 2 main skills today. We're going to learn how to write percent as decimals and fractions. Okay? And then we'll learn how to write fractions, which are mixed numbers, which include mixed numbers, and decimals, and changing those into percent. Okay, so we're going to change from percent to decimals and fractions. And then we're going to go the other way around, from decimals and mixed numbers, which are fractions, to percent. So we want to be able to work interchangeably between those, that fraction, decimal, and percent. So example 1, and we're at the top of page 118 now. Okay, so percent greater than 100% or less than 1% can also be written as decimals or fractions. So number 1 asks us to write 0.2% as a decimal and as a fraction in simplest form. So let's start off with the percent. So here we have 0.2%. Okay, and we want to write that as a decimal. So to change it to a decimal, the first step is to, we'll copy it down, but take off the percent sign, so 0.2. Now, what does percent mean? The word percent means per 100, which means divide by 100. So if I dropped off the divide by 100, or I dropped the percent sign, I actually need to do that. Okay, so I need to divide by 100. How do we divide by 100? Move our decimal 2 places to the left, okay, because we have a base 10 number system. That's the same as dividing by 100, 0.002. I'm going to pause just for a moment. So then we also need to write it as a fraction in simplest form. So we already have our decimal 2 thousandths. This is the 10th, 100th, thousandth. And when we read it correctly, that's going to help us to write it correctly. So this is 2 thousandths. So when we write it as a fraction, we write it as 2 over 1,000. Then we look at 2 over 1,000, 2 thousandths, and we see that the 2 and the 1,000 are both even. So even numbers are divisible by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1,000 divided by 2 is 500. So this is 1/500 as a fraction in simplest form. Example 2. Write 170% as a mixed number in simplest form and as a decimal. So we have 170%. So first of all, let's write that 170. And when we say percent, that means per 100. So 170% is the same thing as 170 per 100. So I'm taking the 170%. I'm writing it as 170 over 100. So that's not a mixed number, though. That's an improper fraction. A mixed number has a whole number and a proper fraction. So how many times can 100 go into 170? It can go in one time with 70 hundredths left over. So 170 over 100, we divide that out. So we would say 170 over 100, and then we would say equals, and then we would write the mixed number 1 and 70 hundredths. But is 70 hundredths in simplest form? No, it's not, because 70 and 100 are both divisible by 10. 70 divided by 10 is 7. 100 divided by 10 is 10. So that's our mixed number in simplest form, 1 and 7/10. Okay, and that's going to be really helpful for us to write it as a decimal, because when I read this, 1 and 7/10, I can write it as a decimal, 1 and 7/10, just by knowing my place value. 7/10, 7/10, 1 and 7/10, 1 and 7/10. Okay, let's look at example A. Okay, so here we have 0.25%. So we want to write that as a decimal first, and then as a mixed number or fraction in simplest form. Okay, so first of all, to write that as a decimal, we need to drop the percent sign. So dropping the percent sign will give us 0.25. Okay, so but if I drop the per 100 or divide by 100, because percent means divide by 100, I need to divide by 100. So drop the percent sign, move your decimal 2 places to the left here, and then what goes in that empty space is a 0. So as a decimal, this would be 0.0025. 0.0025. Then we need to write it as a fraction, and then we need to simplify it. Okay, so in order to write it as a fraction, it's going to be really helpful if I read it, the decimal, correctly. So this is the 10th, 100th, 1000th, 10,000th place. So this would be 25 10,000. So 25 10,000. Okay, and then I know that 25 will always go to 100. 25 goes into 100. So any number that ends in a 00 is always going to be divisible by 25. Okay, so I'm going to take both of these, the numerator and the denominator, and I'm going to divide by 25. And I'm going to give you a little fun mental math tip, okay? So first of all, the numerator, no problem. What's 25 divided by 25? 1, okay? Now let's look at our denominator. Take your pinky finger and cover up the last 2 zeros just for a moment. So instead of having 10,000, what do you have? You have 100. We all know how many times 25 goes into 100, right? How many times does 25 go into 100? 4 times. Good job. So we write the 4. Okay. So, oops, I just wrote on my book down here. Okay. So we're ignoring these last 2 zeros just for a moment. And we can do 100 divided by 25 in our head. That's 4. But it wasn't 100 divided by 25. It was 10,000 divided by 25. And that has 2 extra zeros. So all we need to do is take those 2 extra zeros and add them onto our 4. 1/400. Okay. So 10,000 divided by 25 is 400. Excuse me, is 1/400. Here. 25, 10,000 simplifies to 1/400. And 10,000 divided by 25 equals 400. Just to make sure I said that clearly. All right, let's look at B. Now B, I'm going to ask you to think about this. If we know that 100% is equal to 1 whole, 100% is equal to 1 whole, 300% would be equal to what, everybody? 3. Okay. If 100% is equal to 1, because it's the whole thing, 100% of it, it's 1 whole, 300% would be equal to 3. Okay. So, and if you want to think of this mathematically, so 300%, what does that mean? It means 300 per 100. 300 divided by 100. What is 300 divided by 100? 3. Okay. And then as a fraction in simplest form, guess what that is? It's also 3. You could write it as 3/1. But even more simplified than that, it's 3. So the decimal is just 3 or 3.0, 3.0. And then the fraction is also 3. Let's look at letter C. So we want to write this as a decimal and then as a mixed number or fraction in simplest form. So 530%. So we will drop, to write it as a decimal, we drop the percent sign and divide by 100. So 530. Currently our decimal is here. After the 0, then we divide by moving that decimal 2 places left, 5.3. So the decimal goes here, 5 3/10, or 5.3. So, and that should make sense to us because if 100% is 1, 500% would be 5, 530% would be 5.3. Okay, so what would 500% be, everybody? 5. So what would 530% be? 5.3. All right, then we have to write it as a fraction in simplest form. Well, I have the decimal. If I read the decimal the correct way, that's going to be very helpful in writing it as a fraction. So how do I read this decimal correctly? 5 3/10. So how do I write that as a fraction? 5 3/10. So read this, 5 3/10. Read this, 5 3/10. All right, example 3. Jimmy's savings increased by 250%. Write 250% as a mixed number in simplest form and as a decimal. Okay, so I like to start off with the decimal, so I'll start off with so I have the 250%. Okay. Well, actually, let's do fraction first, because they said fraction first, then decimal last. So let's get used to doing it in either order. So 250% means 250 per 100, because percent means per 100. Percent means per 100. So then we divide that out. How many times does 100 go into 250? Well, it goes in 2 times with 50 hundredths left over. So 50 hundredths. So we have 2 and 50 hundredths. And then we want that in simplest form. 50/100ths is the same as 1/2. So this would be 2 and 1/2. So that's our mixed number in simplest form. Okay. And then we know that 1/2 is 0.5, right? So we know this is 2.5, or you could look at it this way, 2 and 50/100ths would be 2 and 50/100ths, so 2 and 50/100ths, but we don't need the 0, so we have just 2 and 5/10 as the decimal equivalent. Okay, and that should make sense to us because we know 200% would be 2, 300% would be 3, 250% would be exactly halfway in between, 2.5. So this means he more than doubled his savings. Let's look at example B. The stock price for a corporation increased by 11. Let me get my Zoom a little better than that. Hold on, my Zoom in a little more. The stock price for a corporation increased by 0.11%. Write 0.11% as a percent as a decimal and as a fraction in simplest form. So I'm just going to work over here so there's a little more space. So 0.11%, so 0.11%. Okay, so if we want to write that as a decimal, we're going to drop the percent sign and then move our decimal 2 places to the left because percent means divide by 100. So if we take off the percent sign, we have to divide by 100. So move this 2 places to the left here. And what goes in that empty space is 0 as our placeholder. So this is 0.0011. So there it is as a decimal. And then to write it as a fraction, it's really helpful to read the decimal correctly. So it's 11 over, because that's our number 11. And we read it without the zeros to the left of it. And then we ask what place value are we finishing in here. This is the 10th, 100th, 1000th, 10,000. So 11, 10,000. Okay. And that can't be simplified further. 11 is a prime number, and it does not go easily into 10,000. Okay, top of page 119. Okay, so now we went from percents to decimals and fractions. Now we're going to go the other way around. We're going to start with either a fraction mixed number or a decimal, and then we'll convert it to a percent. So to write a decimal as a percent, multiply by 100 and add the percent sign. To write a mixed number as a percent, first write the mixed number as an improper fraction, and then scale it to 100 as a denominator, to 100 in the denominator. So let's look at example 4. Write 1 1/4 as a percent. So we'll start off with the 1 1/4. And we'll change that to a mixed number, okay, or excuse me, it is a mixed number. We'll change it to an improper fraction. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So this is 5/4. And then we'll set up a proportion to scale that to hundredths because percents are always per 100. So 4 times 25 gets us to 100. 5 times 25 will take us to 125. Okay, so we have 125 per 100. 125 per 100, which is the same thing as 125 per cent. Okay, so when we have the denominator of 100, that's a percent. That's per 100. So 125 per 100 is 125%. Let's look at example E. So 2 and 9/10. We know that's really close to 3, right? 3 would be 300%. Okay, so let's do an estimation first. So just remember, 3 would be 300%. Do we all agree? So we can pretty much know that this is going to be 290%, but let's prove it mathematically because we want to make sure we always know how to get there, okay? So this is almost 3. We know 3 is 300%, so we already know that this is going to be 290%, but we're going to show our work because some of the problems on your homework, you're not going to be able to do them in your head. You need to show your work. So we're always showing our work. So first, let's go ahead and write it as an improper fraction. We do that by doing denominator times whole number plus numerator. So 10 times 2 is 20, plus 9 is 29. So 29 tenths. And then we want to scale that up so that it has a denominator of 100, right? So we want to know 29 tenths would be equivalent to how many hundredths? This is basically the opposite of what we taught you in elementary school. We were always simplify the fraction, simplify the fraction. Okay, now we're actually scaling it up because we purposefully want the denominator to be 100, so we can write it as per 100 or per cent. Okay, so we're scaling it up. How do we get from 10 to 100? We multiply by 10. So how do we get from 29 to our answer? We also multiply by 10. 29 times 10 is 290. So we have 290 per 100. 290 per 100 is 290 per cent. Okay? And we look at it. We want, before we finish, we make sure that is a reasonable answer. Again, 2 and 9 tenths is almost 3. We know 3 is 300%. So yes, 290% makes sense. If I had like 2,090%, that would not be reasonable. Okay? So 1 is equal to 100%. 2 is equal to 200%. 3 is equal to 300%. Okay? So obviously that's between 200% and 300%. Let's do letter F. 3 and 2/5. Okay? So we know it's bigger than 3, smaller than 4. So our answer is going to be between 300% and 400%. Do we all agree? So we know our ballpark. We know our reasonable answer. So somewhere between 300% and 400%. Okay? So then we'll go ahead and scale up by first changing this to an improper fraction. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 2 is 17. So this is equivalent to 17/5. And then I want to make it a percent. So I got it equal to per 100, because percent is per 100. So I write down 17 over 5 equals blank over 100. So I write down 17 over 5 equals blank over 100. Then I want to see, how do I get from 5 to 100? Well, I would multiply by 20. So what do I need to do to my numerator? I would multiply by 20. Okay, so mental math, you can do times 10 twice. Okay, so 170 times, or 17 times 10 is 170. Doubled is 340. So 340%. 340 per 100 is the same thing as 340%. Okay, now this is probably not my favorite way of doing it, but this is consistent with the way that we've done the problem, and it works every single time. So I honestly, I'm going to show you another way of doing that problem. So just right over here in some extra space, make a little bubble. There's just another way to do it. So we have 3 and 2/5, right? So when I look at 3 and 2/5, I know 2/5 can scale up to 4/10, right? Which is 3 and 4/10. 3 is 300%, right? So 3.4 would be 340%. Okay, so just another way of doing it without changing it from mixed number to an improper fraction. I knew the whole number was 3, so I knew it was going to be 300-some%. Okay, and then I just worried about the fractional part. So in other words, I kept the 3 the whole time. See how that 3 is all the way through? And then I knew the 3 would be the 300%. So then I just worry about the 2/5. Oh, 2/5 is the same as 40/100 or 40%. Okay, so just another way of thinking about it. This is my favorite way, but when we teach it in 6th grade, we teach this rounding, always having that denominator of 100, because that's consistent and very visual. Per 100, per cent. It's always a denominator of 100. Example 5. Write 1 and 68/100 as a percent. So we have 1.68. Well, we know 1 is 100%. We know 2 is 200%. So we know our answer will be somewhere between 100% and 200%. Okay. So we're going to start off by taking we'll add the percent sign. we take our decimal and we move it 2 places to the right. So this is 168%. Okay, example 6. This is tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000. Write 75 10,000ths as a percent. So here, okay, we're going to add the percent sign, which is the same as dividing by 100. So if I divide by 100 here by adding a percent sign, I multiply by 100 here, okay, by moving the decimal 2 places to the right, okay? Because we can't just go around and think, oh, I don't like decimals. I'm going to write it as a percent, so I'll just throw a percent sign on there. Well, no. When you throw a percent sign on it, that really means divide by 100. So then you need to go to the numerical part of the number and multiply by 100. So this will be 0.75%. Okay, letter G, 2 and 5/10. So how do we write that as a percent? Well, what's 2 as a percent? 200%. Okay, so what's 2 and 5/10? So if we did it as a fraction, let's use our consistent method. 2 and 5/10. Scale these up to 100. So it's times 10. I kept the whole number there, so I did change it a little, times 10. So it's 2 and 50 hundredths, okay, which would be 250%. Okay, or in other words, move your decimal 2 places to the right, add a percent sign. Okay, move your decimal 2 places to the right. So 1, 2, so it's going to be here now, and then add a percent sign. So it's 0.4%, so 0.4%. Okay, letter J, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000. So we have 16 10,000. We want to add the percent sign. Okay, remember, adding a percent sign is divide by 100. If I divided by 100 by adding that percent sign, I can multiply by 100 by moving my decimal 2 places to the right. So this is 0.16%. Okay, so that is Chapter 2, Lesson 4, working with percents greater than 100% and working with percents less than 1%. Okay, working interchangeably between those fractions, decimals, and percents.